Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom, and today I want to show you how to use Ajax to process your HTML forms. So this will allow your users to actually submit a form without refreshing the page or redirecting to a different page. So it's all done in the background using Ajax. So we're going to create this very basic login form in this video, which has two fields, username and password. And if I was to actually type a username inside here, such as dcode, and then press submit or login, we get password cannot be empty. If I was to type in here an incorrect password, such as fake, then press login, we get incorrect username / password combination. So it's quite a standard form, but it's done using Ajax. So these messages come from the server. Okay, so essentially we make a request using Ajax to the server, we provide the server with the username and password, and then the server will give us back a list of messages. And it will also say whether or not the login was successful. If the login was successful, then that'll be dcode here as a password. If I log in right now, it was a successful login, so we get redirected to the dashboard HTML page. So that is how this thing works. So let's create this system right now. So inside the blank document, I'll just refresh this from earlier. So inside here, we can begin by actually constructing the HTML for this form. So back inside here, inside the source code, let's create a container to hold the actual form elements. Okay, so inside here, let's make a new div and give it a class of form. Okay, so this form class is just a class I use to actually add some CSS styles to make it look nice. So this class is not required by you. Okay, so inside here, let's now create 4 HTML elements. So these will be, back inside here, these 4 elements will be the container for the error messages, one for the username and for the password, and one for the login button. Okay, so let's start with the username and password fields. So back inside here, let's add a label for the username with some text of username and also a corresponding input field. Okay, input type of text, an ID of username to match that one right there. We can also turn off spell check. So spell check equals false. Okay. We can do the same thing for the password. Copy this, paste it down here, change these values to password, and password inside here as well. We can also remove this spell check attribute. Okay. So we can save this and refresh, and we have our 2 input fields ready to go. Okay, let's now make the submit button. So back inside here, let's make a new button of type submit with an ID of btn-submit with some text of login. We can now save this and refresh, and the form is looking quite good. So now we can actually add the error messages list. Okay, so this is actually an unordered list. So back inside here, let's make a new unordered list element with an ID of form-messages. Okay, inside this list, let's add one sample list item. We can say generic error number 1. We can save this and then refresh the page, and we get that right there. So now let's add some CSS styles to make this look a bit more, scary. Red text, red background, etc. So back inside here, let's add some styles for the form messages ID. Okay, let's just put some really standard background color. So background color RGB 255 232 232. That'll be a light red. Let's give it a border of 1px solid and then red. A color of red. A display of block. So block is the default display. We're going to change this to none later on to actually hide this element. Okay, but for now it'll be block. We can have the font size of being 12px. A font weight of being bold. A margin bottom of 10px. Some padding of 10px on the top and bottom, and 25px for the left and right, and a max width of 250px. Okay, so we can now save this and refresh the browser, and we get our nice scary looking error messages. Okay, so this will be filled by the actual JavaScript code. So we can remove the generic error inside here and have an empty form messages list. And we can also get rid of the display property and make that none. So when the page loads up, there's obviously going to be no errors just yet. So if I was to save this and refresh, we get a nice clean login form. Okay, so that is all for the HTML and the CSS. So now for the server side and also the JavaScript. Okay, so I've actually already wrote a PHP script for the server side. It's called checklogin.php. So this script right here, essentially, it gets the username and password from the request, and then it checks, if they're empty or if they're successful, and then so on. So it has two variables. The first one being okay. So we're going to assume by default that the login was successful. So okay equal to true. We also have a messages array. This will contain all of the messages, empty password, empty username, successful login maybe, and also the incorrect one. So that'll contain all the messages for the supplied username and password. Right? So this first condition checks if the username was provided. If it wasn't provided, then okay equal to false. So the login was unsuccessful immediately. Okay, and messages, we have one message here, username cannot be empty, and that gets added to the array right there. The same thing goes for the password. Okay, if a username and password were provided, then we can check if they were both dcode. That is the correct login details. If it was, then we have a successful login, and okay is equal to true. If not, then it's an incorrect username password combination. So I figured that this code right here would be quite long to actually code up and explain. So that's why I've actually coded this before the video. But if you have any questions about this code, just let me know in the comment section. Alright, so down here, this one will actually output a JSON string containing the information about the attempted login. This JSON string contains two properties, one being okay, this will be true or false depending on a successful login or not, and one being messages, which is an array containing all of the messages. So that is the PHP script. Again, if you'd like an explanation in more detail, just let me know. Alright? So I'll also publish this code right here. Alright, check the description for that. So now, with this code, I'll just show you an example of a server response. Okay, so back inside the demo, if I was to actually submit this, in the network tab of the developer tools, we can see the request right there. So this PHP script ran and it gave us this response right here. In the preview, we get the JSON string. The JSON string or the JSON object, right? So we have messages, an array, and those two messages right there, and also AK equal to false. All right, so we can see how the PHP script works. All right, so now we're going to use JavaScript to actually, make a request to this file, and then we're going to handle the response, which will be these two parameters, and then we're going to, update the HTML based on the response. So let's do that right now. Back inside our document, the first thing to do is to actually get a reference to all of these 4 HTML elements. Okay, so inside the JavaScript, let's make a new constant, which will be an object containing, key value pairs to each of these elements. So let's make a new constant and call this one form equal to a new object. This will have 4 properties, 1 for each one of these elements. So the first one can be username. So username is equal to document.getElementById. We'll pass in username right there, which matches that one right there. So now this username right here is equal to that input field right there. We can do the same thing for the password. So we'll say password right there. Alright. And the same thing for both the submit button and also the error messages, or the 4 messages. So we'll say submit equal to by ID btn-submit, and 1 for the messages equal to document get by ID, and pass in form messages right there to match with that one right there. Okay, so now if I was to actually console.log the form object, save this, and then refresh the browser, we get that right there. If I expand this, we get all of our 4 elements. Okay, so now we can work with these elements to, submit this form. Alright, so the first thing to do is to add an event listener to this login button. So when this button gets pressed, we're going to run a function which will then make the request to the server. Alright, so back inside the JavaScript, let's add an event listener to the submit button. So down here, let's say form.submit.add event listener. We're going to listen for the click event. Okay, when the button gets clicked, we're going to run this function inside here, this arrow function. Alright, for now, we'll just console.log, button pressed. Alright, so we can save this and refresh the browser, and then press this button, and we get button pressed. So let's change this code here to make an XML HTTP request. So we can make a new constant called request, which is equal to a new XML HTTP request. Okay, so this object will actually make the request. Okay, when the request comes back, okay, so request.onload. When the request comes back, we're going to run this function inside here. Okay, for now, we'll just console.log and then pass in here request.response text. So request.response text refers to the actual response from the server. In this case here, that should be that response JSON string right there. Alright, so back inside here, let's just save this. Now let's open the request, okay, and say it's going to be a post request. So let's say request.open. We're going to make a post request as the method, and this will be to the check login PHP file. Alright, we can now set a request header to say to the server this will be a standard URL encoded request or request body. So down here, let's say request.setRequestHeader will say content type equal to this one right here, application-x www-form-URL encoded. So that means the server will now expect to see a request body which is formatted in the form of a key value pair string. Alright, down here we can now send the request. So we're going to say request.send. This will take in a single argument. Let's just put request data inside here for now. Alright, so we can now create this request data variable. So this one will contain the username and password which is retrieved from the actual input fields. So let's make this this constant right now. So up here, let's say const request data is equal to, and then use a backtick JavaScript string for the template literals. Alright, we're going to say username equals, then use a template or the interpolation right here. Alright, we're going to say form, so form dot username dot value. Okay, put an ampersand and then say password equals the same thing for the password field. So form dot password dot value. So this right here is going to get the value, so dot value of the input username and the input password, and then put it inside this key value pair. Okay, so just to say as an example, I'll just console.log here. We can console.log the request data. Okay, so let's just save this and then refresh the browser and then put some content inside here. We'll say dcode and then let's just say bottle. Press login and we get that right there. So that right there is the actual request body. Alright, so we can see how that works. So the server will read this and then obviously it'll run this script and then give us a result. The result is that one right there. Alright, so let's just go back inside here and we can remove this line for that console.log. Okay, so when the request comes back, okay, so on server response, we're going to attempt to pass that response as JSON. So we're going to try and convert the JSON string into a standard JavaScript object. Let's make a new variable and call this one response, maybe response object, okay, equal to null for now. And then down here, let's make a new try catch block. Inside the try, we're going to attempt to assign a new value to the response object variable equal to JSON.pass. We're going to pass in request.response text. So this right here is going to try and convert the server response into a standard JavaScript object. If that fails, we'll say catch, pass in E right there. We'll just say console.error. Console.error could not pass JSON. Okay, so if the server doesn't give us a JSON string, then we'll just say, console.error. Alright? So we now have a response object, okay, containing both the OK and the messages properties. Alright? If there was no error in this JSON passing, then we can hand over the response object to a separate function. We'll call this one handle response, and we'll pass in the response object. Okay? Let's now quickly define this handle response function. So down here, let's make a new function. Okay, call this one handle response. This takes in a single argument, that being the response object. Alright, for now, let's just console.log the response object. Alright, let's just save this and refresh and then talk through it. Refresh, let's press login. We get that right there. So OK is false. It was a unsuccessful login. There was nothing provided. If you expand this, inside the messages array, we get username cannot be empty and password cannot be empty. Alright. So, just to recap what's happening here, we are, sending out a request. When the request comes back, well, the request comes with the username and password value. So the server gets both of those values, it runs a check, and it gives us a JSON string. When the server comes back, we try and convert that JSON string into a standard JavaScript object, and then if that was successful, we're going to pass the response object into a handle response function. This function just console.logs the object. Okay, so let's put some logic inside here to actually either display some messages to the user or redirect to a different page. So we're going to say if the response object dot OK, so if it was OK, a successful login, then we can say location dot href is equal to something like dashboard.html, and that will redirect the user. Okay, let's just make this file dashboard.html and put h1 welcome inside there, just for an example. Okay, so now we can save this and refresh the browser, type in the correct decode and decode combination, press login, and we get welcome. So we've been redirected to the dashboard page. Alright, so if the combination was incorrect, or the fields weren't supplied properly, then we can display the error messages to the user. Okay, so the first thing to do is to actually clear the unordered list elements. So there might be already some list items inside here, so we're going to get rid of all the list item tags inside this unordered list element. So inside the JavaScript, we can just say while form.messages.firstChild. So while there is a first child, we can just remove child form.messages.firstChild. So that's just saying every time there's a first child, just remove it, and that will empty the unordered list. Okay, So now we can loop through each one of the messages that is given by the server. So we can say response object dot messages. Okay, so that array, let's just submit this, that array right there. So for each message dot for each, we're going to run this arrow function. Okay, this function right here. For each message, we're going to create a new list item HTML element. So make a new constant, call this one li, equal to document.createElement. Going to create an li tag or element. And then we can assign, so li.textContent, we can assign the text content for this list item equal to the message from the server. Alright, and then we can say form.messages.appendChild li. Alright, so that'll loop through all the messages from the server and make a new list item tag for each message. And then we can finally set the display property of the 4 messages to block. Alright, so down here we can now say form.messages.style.display equal to block, and that'll show the actual messages lists. Okay, we can now save this and refresh the browser. Alright, type in a username, press login, and we get password cannot be empty. So it works. I can now type in a fake password, press login, and we get that. Type in dcode here as well, and we get login. So we are now all done. So that's how you can achieve this system. Now the whole advantage of this is to obviously prevent the user from being redirected, but I guess it also allows you to let the server have control over the validation. So these messages, as I said, were returned by the server, so it's sort of separating your front end from your back end. So obviously to change the form validation, just change the server script. Alright, so that is how you can use Ajax to process your HTML forms. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.